Hello and welcome to the Arise interview, where we take time to reflect on the big stories from the news and on the fortunes and affairs of the world in an hour of conversation with commentators, analysts and thought leaders. I'm Charles Anyegulu. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, they are some of the biggest and most enduring names in Nigerian journalism. A-list frontline correspondents, writers, commentators, columnists and publishers who've honed their craft over long and worthy careers. The epic sweep of their work opening the Nigerian imagination to a new world of possibilities. They've all become octogenarians: Sam Amuka, Segun Osoba, Patrick Dele and Lindsay Barrett. But their journalistic, editorial and creative brilliance has only been cast into sharper relief by the passage of time. Truly, they are Nigeria's greatest journalists, whose exploration of the world was set out on the pages of newspapers and magazines. Today, we celebrate these brave, brilliant men who lit an intellectual spark that became a roaring flame. Coming up. Now today, we celebrate Nigeria's great journalists who've turned 80 and beyond, whose exploration of the world marked them out, often pitting them against the machinery of government armed only with the power of the pen, their work sometimes seeming as futile as opposing a tank with an air pistol. But today, the work they began all those years ago and have sustained through decades has helped to fashion a nation and to detonate a cultural, social, economic and political explosion that still resonates in Nigeria today. We begin with the oldest practicing media professional in Nigeria, one of this country's most skillful and dynamic publishers, and now the elder statesman of Nigerian media, the octogenarian journalist and columnist Prince Sam Amuka, known popularly as Uncle Sam, who turned 85 in June. Apart from being noted for founding and co-founding some of Nigeria's most widely read newspapers, The Vanguard and The Punch, Sam Amuka is also credited with generating a unique form of the political column, bringing to bear the techniques and insights of the political philosopher. President Buhari called him the gentleman of the press, and the president of the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria, Prince Nduka Obebuna, described him as an icon and a leading light in Nigerian journalism. Well, to help us access the careers of Prince Sam Amuka and the other octogenarian journalists whom we celebrate today, I'm joined now from our Lagos studios by the author, editor and fellow of the Nigerian Guild of Editors, Lanre Idowu, and via online Cisco WebEx by the celebrated journalist and founder of the Journalism Clinic, Taiwo Obe, and here in the Abuja studio by the writer and columnist Dele, who is also a former special advisor to a state governor. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for joining me. And this is a very special day indeed, because even as we celebrate those octogenarians, I think in a way we're also celebrating all three of you who have also made their mark, although you're considerably younger than the octogenarians. But thank you ever so much for being with us. And let me start with you, Lanre Idowu. I mean, you might agree or disagree, but I expect you will agree that Sam Amuka has been one of the people who has helped to develop distinctive journalism in Nigeria. Your thoughts?
Thank you. Without a doubt, the man we all fondly call Uncle Sam, that is Mr. Samson Ururu Amuka, is without doubt the oldest practicing journalist in Nigeria today. As you said in your introductory remarks, he not only was one of the two founders of the Punch newspapers, he also gave the nation Vanguard newspapers. Well before then, he was with the Times and some other publications of the era. He's been in the practice now for over 6 decades. In a place like Nigeria, that is a lifetime. And he is someone who we all revere. We hold him as a mentor of great possibilities. A man who is simple, who is accessible, and who is ever willing to lend the years of wisdom and experience that is garnered in this practice. So it's not surprising that the Newspaper Proprietors Association named him the life patron. And it's a role that he's been playing admirably. Beyond the newspaper world, he's also very, very available, very accessible to other professionals in related fields, in public relations, in advertising. And we can only say that we are grateful that the Lord has blessed him with a long life and that he's been able to share the gifts, the blessings that the Lord has given him with his professional children, if you like.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that intro. I think that sets the stage for taking the discussion forward. I'm just coming to you, Taiwo Obey. I mean, just listening to Lanre Dowu there, he was talking about the simplicity that characterized Sam Amuka. President Buhari called him the gentleman of the press. I mean, was that to do with his nature, his style, or just his modus operandi?
Well, I think I should just add that he is still practicing. And that is very important because I only just, I think towards the end of last year, we had an arrangement together, the Journalism Clinic and Vanguard, where we engaged the journalists in live coverage of the elections. He is still practicing. He goes to the editorial meetings. He's still concerned about how Vanguard is being run. But back to your question, yes. I remember that when we went to Ibadan to launch a book by Osoba and Felix Adenaike. And he was invited to come to the house by Osoba for lunch. What did he do? He said, well, I will join you later. But of course, what he did was that he took some of us to a joint, to have local food in Ibadan. That's the kind of person he is, is down to earth, he knows a story, a news story when he sees one, and he's a quintessential newsman. And we'll continue to hope and pray that he's with us for a few more years.
Well, absolutely. And I thank you very much for that sort of insight into the life of the man. I would have given anything to be at that joint that he took you guys to, because I rather fancy Nigerian food myself, particularly on the local level. But let me bring in Dele Olowo, who's with me in the studio, the writer, the journalist, who is also a former special advisor. And you're obviously listening to all of this, Dele, and sort of taking it all in. I think what sort of sets him apart as well is the fact that, I mean, he's obviously best known for founding and co-founding Vanguard and Punch newspapers, but at heart, he was a quintessential journalist, a political columnist, and he never quite left that, did he?
Yes, Uncle Sam Amuka, his presence appears to have been almost eternal. He's been always there. It's like a milestone on the road to journalism development in Nigeria. And he has carried it all with great aplomb. He never seems to relent. He's always involved, no matter at what level. And he has managed to float a newspaper that is somewhat middle of the road, polite, part of it never really been left out. And I think it's a great credit for him that he has continued to prove relevant in essential ways to the practice of journalism and public life in Nigeria.
And of course, it's not easy, is it? I mean, to found one newspaper, the amount of energy, I mean, because you're not just talking about the journalism, you're talking about the business aspect of it, the political aspect of it, because you've got to navigate through the political waters of Nigeria.
I think that in spite of Uncle Sam's very robust Midwestern origins, he's essentially a Lagos man. He's part of the Lagos environment, and he knows how to navigate it. He knows what to avoid, what to do, and what not to do. So that really makes him a man for all seasons, so to speak. That's my own characterization of him.
Well, thank you for that. And let's not, of course, forget, you made a very interesting point there about Lagos being at the heart of journalism in this country. And let me just come back to you, Lanre Idowu, because, of course, these were people, as Dele Olowo was saying, Lagos, the very heart of not just Nigerian journalism, but certainly African journalism at the time. And these were people who not only grew up in the colonial era, but also during military rule. I mean, they worked during military rule, both of which they found pretty odious. I mean, how much would that have presented people like Sam Amuka with an ethical issue in terms of the way that he was reporting the news?
Well, let me say that one other point about the relevance of Sam Amuka to us. He's someone who has run through the entire gamut of journalism practice. He's been a reporter, he's been a feature writer, he's been an editor, he's been a manager, and he's also an entrepreneur. So he knows what is involved. Yes, he started in colonial times, in the 50s. He understands very well what the challenges were then, the excitement of the journalists as they prepared for independence, the hopes, the dreams of what Nigeria will become. He's also gone through what has happened to Nigeria shortly after independence, the military coup, the various military administrations. And it's reflected the reality, is conveyed his own sensibilities, his sensitivities to these developments in various writings.
Well, absolutely.
Again,
I'm going to have to just
columnist.
jump in there, Lanre, because we've got to take a break, but do stay with us. We're going to be talking some more about the other octogenarians. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more till ahead as we continue our celebration of some of Nigeria's greatest journalists who've turned 80 and beyond. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Onyekoldu. Now let's talk about another great enduring journalist, the octogenarian Chief Olusegun Osoba, who turned 80 just over a year ago. Segun Osoba, as he's known, has been for years a master of the broad sweep of Nigerian journalistic and political history, and now starting yet another decade at the top of the country's journalism pecking order. Beginning his career in 1964, working with the Daily Times as a trainee reporter covering crime stories, Mr. Osoba went on to editorially lead the Sunday Times, the Daily Times, and the Herald newspapers in Nigeria, and to work as a local journalist for the BBC, the Times of London, Newsweek magazine, and the United Press International News Agency, or UPI, before making the transition into politics and twice becoming governor of Ogun State.
It exposes you. I related with Tafa Balewa in Parliament, Okotiebo, I don't know Kusanya. I related with Zikiwe, covering Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. I related with Papa Awolowo, covering Papa Awolowo as opposition leader in Parliament. I related with Sadana of Sokoto. See, reporting gives you opportunities, if you harness it very well, to meet great people. And you don't lose your head. And I say I'm a reporter because till today, I don't sleep before 2. I'm still always, that nose for news is still there. And Professor Akifele once said there will be communication in heaven. So I told him that I will be a journalist even in heaven.
Well, don't I know the feeling? And with me from our Lagos studios, the author, editor, and fellow of the Nigerian Guild of Editors, Lanre Idowu, and via online Cisco WebEx, the celebrated journalist and founder of the Journalism Clinic, Taiwo Obey, and here in Abuja, the writer and columnist Dele Olowu. Thank you, gentlemen, for staying with us. And let me come to you, Lanre Idowu, again. Sorry I had to interrupt you, but I'm afraid these breaks are written in stone, so we had to take them or it would have cut you off. But just listening to Segun Osoba there, I expect there are things he said that you connect with, one of them, of course, being the addiction to journalism.
Chief Olusegun Osoba remains one of the great prize of the profession. He loves to refer to himself as a reporter. And anyone who understands the business of journalism will understand how central, how crucial the role and the place of the reporter is to the news process. So what he said is not just an idle claim. It's something that has been backed up over the years. Scoops after scoops that he was able to unearth when he was practicing, contributed so much to project him as an outstanding reporter. And till today, as he has also acknowledged, and I can say to him, I can testify to that, he shares gists, news leads that he hears, he shares with journalists. He sends WhatsApp messages at odd hours of the night, asking for clarification or sharing with you something that he's heard, and he wants to know your own perspective. So it's something that has become second nature to him. And I think there are so many lessons for present-day journalists to learn from that. You should love what you do, and when you love it, the only way you can do it and do it well is to continue to reinvent yourself, to continue to look for new ways of performing all these old chores. And I think he's done that well, and I'm happy to say there are a few proteges who are emulating him.
And thank you very much for that. And Taiwo and Mr. Obey, just picking up from what Lanre Idowu was saying there in terms of reinventing himself. I mean, he certainly did, didn't he? I mean, having, gone through the whole range of both local and international journalism, he, if you like, transmogrified into a politician, and not just a politician, but a two-time governor.
Yes, I agree with you. I think I would like to tie back to the kind of training that he and someone like Sam Amuka had. They were trained, or they were in the Daily Times, and the Daily Times of old was. It was synonymous with Alhaji Joseph. In terms of training, it gave at some point, if you are not a graduate, you couldn't even practice in Daily Times. He himself was trained, he attended training all over, in Geneva, in London. I'm talking of Joseph himself. So that was the foundation that this gentleman had. Sam Amuka, Osoba, and quite a number of people who have excelled and are still excelling in this business. Like Chief Osoba said, reporting is the soul of this business. It's either, there's no other way to put it. I see a lot of all the writers and all that. You must be able to know what news is all about. That is the training that they got at Daily Times. That's the kind of that's what we learned from them. You know, that you must be able to see, you must be able to get water out of a rock. And I think it's so if the man is waking up at 2 a.m. and he has had something, he needs to be able to get to the heart of what it is that has happened. So yes, is the kind of foundation they had at Daily Times, and you must give that to Alhaji Joseph, Babatunde Joseph.
And of course, so I mean, the point there really being that tenacity is an essential part of journalism, isn't it, Dele Olowu? Taiwo Obey talking there about the quintessential importance of proper journalistic training, which is what gave these great men that solid foundation. Do you find a big disparity between the quality of training then and now in Nigeria?
Our boys, the younger elements, are getting very good training. And the kind of knowledge that is available now is quite different from the kind of knowledge we were exposed to.
But isn't it the same fundamental journalistic roots? You must be a good writer. You must be a tenacious reporter.
Of course,
you must have good, solid vocabulary.
That is one of the points I was going to refer to is Chief Segun Osoba's reference to himself as a reporter. It's a confession of commitment.
Absolutely.
You understand? He was committed to the job, and he did it to the best of his ability. But beyond that, people don't understand that he was able to move on from journalism to politics.
Absolutely.
It's also an indication of his commitment. When he was in the paper in Ibadan, he transformed it. Many thought it was just a happy accident. As they say in popular music, they say your first record is an accident, the second one becomes a duty.
Yes.
Segun Osoba not only transformed the sketch, when he was challenged, he moved on from the sketch and went to Ilorin to transform the Herald. But beyond that, he also showed his tenacity and commitment quite frequently, just in fact outside journalism itself. He had a famous case, if people remember, in Ibadan. His dry cleaner, he said, destroyed his clothes in the course of cleaning them. And he went to court, told the judge that when he wore the clothes, he looked ridiculous. The judge asked that he should wear the clothes in court. Segun Osoba took the pains, wore the clothes, and it was determined that he actually looked ridiculous. And the dry cleaner was fined, and he got reparation. Of course, he rejected whatever was given, but he had pointed out a lesson. You understand?
Yes.
And this was what he projected. This sense of commitment in journalism, in fact, provided a jump for him to go into politics. And that's what has led him up to now, I think.
Very interesting. Stay with us. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our celebration of some of Nigeria's greatest journalists who've turned 80 and beyond. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniegolu. Now to another octogenarian journalist, Dr. Patrick Dele Cole, who succeeded in placing the day-to-day struggles in Nigeria in the context of a grand battle of ideas, managing to combine intellectual rigor with an incorrigibly high romanticism. Dele Cole, as he is fondly known, turned 80 last month, and at various stages of his life he's been a journalist, historian, diplomat, administrator and politician. But it is the power of his journalism and the wonderfully demanding scratch of his pen that we celebrate today. From his years as director of New Nation Press to a stint as director of Guardian newspapers and onto his managing directorship of the Daily Times newspaper, Dele Patrick Cole has led Nigerian journalism from the front, sharp as a needle and without a doubt a nationwide bestseller and an intricate and elegant writer whose best books and numerous articles scratch away the veneer of Nigerian life, exposing the contradictions and tensions beneath.
I think that if you don't like the British, there's no reason why you should actually like them. Because they did a number of horrible things to us. And our historians, when they are writing the story, do not have to be nice to them, because frankly they weren't particularly nice to us. And I think it is fair to say that we got our history through struggle. We fought for it. It wasn't given to us. In the Second World War, we used the words which they used. And that the words that they used was that the war of 1939 to 1955 was a war of self-determination. You should be, when people are determined to be free, you cannot suppress them. It was those words, and it was Woodrow Wilson that made those statements. But of course, when he was making those statements, he didn't think of India and Africa. He was thinking about white people. The thing to say really, young men, what I want to tell you is you must develop a reading culture. You must develop a reading culture.
Patrick Dele Cole there, and with me from our Lagos studios, the author, editor and fellow of the Nigerian Guild of Editors, Lanre Idowu, via online Cisco WebEx, the celebrated journalist and founder of the Journalism Clinic, Taiwo Obey, and here in Abuja, the writer and columnist Dele Olowu. Thank you for staying with us, gentlemen. And let me come to you, Lanre Idowu, because of course, just listening to Dele Cole there, I met him quite a few years ago, and it all comes rushing back. I mean, not just a brilliant journalist, but someone with great intellectual capacity.
He's a little bit different from the two other gentlemen that we've discussed. He came in from the top, not that he rose through the ranks. He was armed with a PhD in history, first-class brain. He came into Nigerian journalism as administrator of the Daily Times following the takeover of the Times by the federal government in 1975. He came in, I think, 77. He was able to learn very quickly. He had some rough time at the beginning. There was some protest about his style. Nigerian journalists have been used to what they call, a carryover from the colonial times, that the editor of the paper signs the newspaper. Colonial authorities prescribed that not only must the paper have an editor whose name is published, his address too must be published. So that mounted a lot of pressure on the journalist. And so he came with the idea of an editorial advisor. He wanted the editors to report or clear some of their writings with the editorial advisor, which they initially resisted. And I recall that the late Tunji Oseni, and of course another octogenarian, Mr. Dikwo Ajayi, both of them were editors of, Oseni was editor of the Sunday Times then, Ajayi was acting editor of the Daily Times. So there was some confusion over that, which led to the gentlemen being suspended because they didn't want to follow Dr. Cole's prescription. Anyway, over time, they were able to overcome that and work out a tidy arrangement. But I think one of the defining contributions of Patrick Dele Cole to Nigerian journalism is the idea of the editorial board as we know it today. Before his time, the practice was that editorials were written by maybe a handful of 2 or 3 people, the editor and maybe the features editor. They will agree on what the issues of the day were, and between them they will write the editorials. But he copied the concept of an editorial board from the US and introduced that at the Daily Times, where they had full-fledged staff who were members of the editorial board who deliberated and wrote editorials. And that also he carried over to The Guardian, because he was one of the founding minds behind The Guardian. So if you look at his contributions at the Times and his contribution to the Guardian, we will say that he has cemented a very important place for himself in the Nigerian media history. And it's a pleasure to see him looking still his robust self at 80. And all we can wish him is longer life, and even more robust interventions in public affairs. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you very much indeed, Lanre Idowu. Let me bring in Taiwo Obey there, because just listening to Lanre, I mean, there seems to have been an extraordinary explosion of entrepreneurship in those days. I mean, I'm hearing of people, founding newspapers that have endured for so long, and we don't seem to be seeing that kind of, I suppose the medium has changed as well, but I mean, it's quite extraordinary the things they did.
Well, in the case of Dele Cole, I think let's not forget that he came in from the United States, and that also was let me use the word that Lana used, robust ideas, and entrepreneurship. But more than anything else, I think in the case of Dele Cole at Daily Times, he was also willing to. I will have to go back to Alhaji Joseph, because Alhaji Joseph left a conglomerate that there is no one who has replicated it in today's Nigeria. So there was a challenge for Dele Cole to do much more. And let's not also forget that he was the nominee of government. Government has 60% interest in Daily Times, controlling shares. And I think there's one word that I read about him, that he was a great negotiator. So when they had that problem with editors, he was able to use his negotiating skills. Let's also add that he's today a businessman. So yes, there is that spirit of liberalism that he brought to bear in the case of Daily Times, and in the case of Guardian, that he was also a director of. And I think the one word that we need to use here is that he has been successful in all those endeavors. And like I wish to add to Larry's prayer that we continue to enjoy he continues to enjoy the robustness that he has brought to bear in everything that he does. I don't know if you saw, there was when he was 80, there was a WhatsApp video of him lighting his cigar, on the candle, the candle on his cake, and that went viral, and that is Dele Cole for you, Patrick Dele Cole.
Well, I think I would have to agree with you. That is very much Patrick Dele Cole. I mean, I knew him, he knew sort of my family and that sort of thing, and I used to speak to him at one point quite regularly. And I think one thing that struck me about him, Dele Olowu, let me just bring you in, is the fact that he was not only someone who worked with government, he was obviously an ambassador, a politician, but at the heart of it, he was also an activist.
Yes, that is the less well-known part about his own personality. But for the flamboyant Dele Cole, what struck me most was that he was a graft from the civil service into state capitalism. At the time these intrusions began to happen, the reigning creed at that time was that government should control the commanding heights of the economy. So he came in, one of the big advantages was that he brought a new level of intellectual rigor into popular journalism. He brought PhD holders and so on, even though in the end, this also created a huge fissure.
Yes, of course.
Between these so-called people from the ivory tower and those who felt they were the guardians of the magic circle of journalism.
And those who learned from inside the job, on the job.
It wasn't a new feature.
Yes.
Even in my own time, where I worked in the Observer as a graduate, as a young graduate, those who started with O levels felt they knew the business better than those of us who were coming in. Whether good or bad, this thing has continued to trouble all media houses, even up till this point. Those who came in with lesser qualification feel that they are more profound practitioners. It has continued to trouble. But Dele Cole was able to use his own, he's a man of great appeal.
Very charismatic.
A man of great appeal with his cigar,
very
wines,
charismatic. Yeah.
Nice company. There's no idea he wants to push that he will not push. But he carried out substantial change in the daily times of his time. And I'm sure as he celebrates his 80th birthday, he will be able to look back at those advantages with great satisfaction.
I mean, he just seems like someone who's, that's one thing, and I think both Landre Idowu and Taiwo Obe made that point, although they used different words. But there's something about him that just seems ageless. You see what I mean? I mean, he's the kind of guy you think he's going to live forever. You know what I mean? I mean, 20 years from now, he'll be celebrating his 100th birthday.
Although generally we would say this was usually the customary character of media habitat. Wherever you find journalists, you will find a good life. Truly,
ouch.
truly.
I'm not part of that. I can see you clearly lived a good life. I mean, I can see Landre Idowu there. I mean, look, his smile alone will tell you that he's lived a good life, not to talk of Taiwo Obe. I've seen things written about Taiwo, about him, and the way, which is, by the way, a very good thing, the way he's been trying to really help younger journalists, and kind of bring them up and so on. So all three of you, I mean, very honored to have you, but don't go yet, stay with us. You're watching the Arise interview, plenty more still ahead as we continue our celebration of some of Nigeria's greatest journalists who've turned 80 and beyond. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyekolu. Now to the international journalist, playwright, poet, African affairs analyst and photographer Lindsay Barrett. Lindsay is of course originally Jamaican. He first arrived in Nigeria in 1962 for a literary festival and never left. He moved to Ibadan and became one of the custodians of the Mbari Club, where people with unusual minds and great writing skills came to exchange notes and ideas. It helped him to become a figure of great social and literary consequence, to quote an article written by his friend Dele Olowu. But then came the war, at the end of which he became the Director of Information of East Central State. From Nigeria, Barrett became a significant player in drama and film projects across Africa and the UK, as well as an essayist on issues of black identity from apartheid to civil rights. He's written books and worked as a journalist during the conflict in Liberia and Sierra Leone. Here he is speaking just a few months ago on Arise News about the effects of the lockdown on himself. Good to see you, Lindsay. I hope you're keeping well. Just give us a snapshot of what lockdown. Give us a snapshot of what lockdown looks like for you. Tell us your circumstances and how the limits of that have been, of all this sort of these limits that have been imposed, is affecting you.
Well, for the last 3 weeks, Charles, I've sat in one chair and looked at the outside, but I have not gone outside more than 2 or 3 times because I'm told I've reached the danger age. I'll be 79 in a few months' time, and I'm told that once you reach that age, coronavirus goes after you. So things have changed a lot.
Yes, I can imagine. I have to say that we miss you here on Arise News because, I mean, you were somebody whose analysis we valued a lot, and you certainly don't look 79. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what 79 looks like, but I mean, you don't look it. But I mean, in terms of the impact of this strict quarantine that you've had to impose on yourself, in terms of the impact that it's having on you, has it turned you into an anti-social person, as it were, the daily lockdown and travel restrictions? Because we know you as a pretty ebullient character.
Well, actually, Charles, it has forced me to understand more about the social media. I was the only thing I really interacted through before the lockdown was the WhatsApp website, or what they call it. But now my wife and my children have forced me to take more notice of Facebook, Instagram, and so on. So I've learned a bit more about how things are changing, how communication is changing.
Lindsay Barrett, and always a tremendously humorous chap he is. And with me from our Lagos studios, the author, editor, and fellow of the Nigerian Guild of Editors, Lanre Idowu, via online Cisco WebEx, the celebrated journalist and founder of the Journalism Clinic, Taiwo Obe, and here in Abuja, the writer and columnist Dele Olowu. And let me start with you, Dele, because you are quite close to Lindsay Barrett. You actually wrote that really brilliant article about him just a few weeks ago. What a remarkable personal journey he has had, having grown up in Jamaica and ending up as one of the most respected journalists in Nigeria.
Yes, indeed, Charles. My first characterization of great writers, poets, and dramatists was to look at them as extraterrestrial figures. My first real encounter of a genius, of a playwright in human form, was Lindsay Barrett. And this was, first of all, as a voice in 1967. I was a student, a higher school student at St. Patrick's College, Asaba. You know, these were the years, the crisis years. And those of us in the Midwest at that time really conceived of the disagreement as one between the North and the East. It didn't touch us particularly as our governor then tried to give the impression that nobody could launch any attack from the Asaba end. So we thought we were insulated until August 9, 1967, when Biafra streamed into the Midwest. After Biafra left, that now rallied popular opinion, mobilized support in the jurisdiction in favor of the federal effort. So we became, by force of that entry, supporters of the federal argument. As young boys in school, we were not concerned really about the war, the loss of life or the spilling of blood. But the contestations, the arguments seemed to fascinate us. Oh, I support Ojukwu. Oh, I support Gowon. So those things were going on. And it was at this time, soon after they left the Midwest, Enugu fell. And in October, the federal troops were in Enugu. It was a deserted town. But Lindsay Barrett, along with Tupabi Asika, went to Enugu to set up the East Central State and its information department.
And he was supposed to counter Biafran propaganda.
Yes.
Right.
He was part of this effort. And he used to produce a program called Listen and Judge for Yourself. So it was through that agency that I encountered Lindsay Barrett. But soon after that, when I went to the university, I also saw Lindsay there. He was part of a cluster of writers and critics and, you know, those sort of people who will frequent the bar and buttery, go to the theater house and make a lot of happy noises. So I also furtively joined them, even though I was not quite as old as they were and wasn't gifted in any sense the way they were gifted. So I became part of that cluster. And from then on, Lindsay has continued to enchant me. He also came back to Benin, settled there, spent many lovely days or period in that, and he practically knew everybody. But his prose was rancid, was strong, was provocative.
He's a fascinating, fascinating character.
Even at that time, because he had written, at 23, he had written a classic, the song for Mumu.
Yes.
In Jamaica, it was compulsory written in Jamaica, but we did not know him in that light. Instead, what we knew was his effort in the line of popular journalism.
Right. Okay. Let me try and bring in, because we've got just about 2.5 minutes to go. So, gentlemen, if you could possibly keep your answers reasonably brief, I'd appreciate it. But I do want to hear your take on people like Lindsay Barrett. Lanre Doe, let me come to you first. Do you agree? Quite an extraordinary journey he's had from Jamaica to Nigeria.
Indeed. If he were a Yoruba man, the name that readily comes to my mind for him would be Omowale. The child has come back home. Fancy somebody visiting 62, and how many years after? 58 years after. He still feels at home in Nigeria, so Nigeria is home for him. I have always been fascinated by his bundle of talent. I mean, it's like every area of the arts you will find Lindsay. He's a musician, he's a poet, he's a writer, he's a playwright. He's almost everything. I remember there was a time he had a jazz program on radio late at night, and it was always so delightful listening to him. Well, he's just 1 year short of the octogenarian club, and can't wait to see him enter that club this time next year. And I'm sure that he will be celebrated in a very rich, artistic manner. So I wish him well. He's my friend, and I haven't seen him for some years now, but I miss him, and I wish him well. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And let me bring in for a final word there, Taiwo Obey. And just to clear up that confusion, I think Lindsay actually told me last week that he will be 80 today. So I think there's a little confusion, but I expect he is 80. And Taiwo, a final word from you.
Yes, I was going to also clear that, because I spoke with Kamfiofori yesterday, another great Nigerian, and he said Wednesday will be 80 today. So, well, let's wish him happy birthday, because he recently had some surgery. I think I should borrow Mr. Olowo's one word: enchanting. That is what Lindsay is. And I've had very great moments with him when I was editor of Sunday Supplement in the 80s.
Unfortunately, I'm really sorry, Taiwo, but we're out of time. Right. I really can't get into that, but I want to thank all of you exceedingly. Taiwo Obey, Lanre Idowu, and Dele Olowo. Well, that's it for this edition of The Arise Interview. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja and Lagos. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.